Evo, tale naš zvonček pove tukaj, da slišijo, da je konc pogovorov, da lahko Mihael kaj pove in da ni izmoten. Lep dober večer vsem skupaj to soboto. Začel bi s pregovorom. Ni vse zlato, kar se sveti, dragi moji, zato previdnost nikoli ni odveč. Danes bomo mogoče malček dolgi, veliko je programa, ampak informacije, ki jih boste dobili, bodo pa zlata vredni, zato da boste znali oceniti, kdaj dobra beseda najde dober namen in resnično dobro v srcu misli, kdaj pa je dobra beseda zvijača, ki je kot kača, ki te želi zapeljati na drugo stran. Tako da nocoj boste mogoče dobili ravno ta ključ, ko boste lahko razpoznali, kdo je v srcu čist in misli dobro, pa kdo v srcu misli zvijačno oziroma po nekem planu, po računici, po predhodnih dogovorih. To je podobno kot v zakonu, ko se dva poročita in naredita predhodno že vso pogodbo, pol se pa poročita. Takšna pogodba je sanacijo in radice. V latinščini pomeni gnilo v korenini oziroma je treba sanirati v korenini, a ne? Zaradi tega, ker že predhodno ne velja, ker je pogojno. Za poroko je potrebna brezpogojna ljubezen. In tudi za naše sodelovanje velja predvsem enako. No, The Letter je celovečerni film, na katerega sem vas nocoj povabil. Pismo, pa ne kakršnokoli pismo, ampak to je papeška okrožnica, ki ima določeno težo. Veste, kaj sem se odločil? Da bomo tudi mi v društvu poslali okrožnico, pa naj kroži po svetu. Da bomo tudi mi okrožnice delali. Vse jih delamo, ampak bomo naredili eno orenko okrožnico, pa jo bomo ravno tako poslali. Proti okrožnico, a ne? V nasprotno smer, da se srečata. Zdaj tako, ta naš film, katerega podlaga je Laudato Si, kako je do Laudato Si prišlo, do te okrožnice, do tega pisma, vam bom, preden začnemo film gledati, na kratko razložil, zato da boste film bolje razumeli. Po filmu imam pa v PowerPointu še 3 kratke filmčke, ki vam bodo povedali, zakaj je ta film v bistvu zavajanje sveta.
Very much and hello to everyone. In 2015, Pope Francis released his great encyclical letter, Laudato Si. It has surely had a widespread impact on the global stage, as many commentators testified, and in the Church at large. And yet, in the 7 years since then, the environment crisis of our common home has worsened drastically, as Dr. Hersing Ling from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change will explain in a few moments. A few years ago, the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development began to collaborate with filmmaker Nicolas Brown and Off the Fence Productions, with the Laudato Si movement and the Dicastery for Communication to create this documentary film conveying the messages of Laudato Si. The idea of a letter provides the film's title. Laudato Si is an encyclical, a letter of the Pope traditionally passed from church to church. Second, our dicastery sent a letter to the film's protagonists, inviting them to dialogue with the Holy Father. Dialogue is crucial for humanity's peace with the Creator, with all creation, and among us humans. For this dialogue to be authentic, all voices should be heard. But voices from the peripheries are usually ignored in global summits and environmental decision-making, typically dominated by powerful corporate interests. All voices should be heard. But voices from the peripheries are usually ignored in global summits and environmental decision-making, typically dominated by powerful corporate interests. In the peripheries, the voices of youth, the poor, indigenous people, and even wildlife usually languish unheard. Instead, in this case, remarkable leaders were invited. First, in conversation with Pope Francis in Rome, and then sharing their personal stories via this film, and now powerfully showing that the ecological crisis is happening now. The time is over for speculation, skepticism, and denial. The time is over for speculation, skepticism, and denial, and certainly for irresponsible populism. Apocalyptic floods, mega droughts, disastrous heat waves, catastrophic cyclones and hurricanes have become the new normal. They continue today. Tomorrow, they will get worse. From climate disruption and environmental degradation flow loss of lives and livelihoods, forced displacement, and violent conflict. These are not challenges that anyone can resolve alone. As the film, the letter proposes, the world needs inclusive encounters between people from different rooms of our common home to learn from each other and develop real solutions. In his letter, Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, "I would like to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home." The film, the letter, provides such an encounter and dialogue. This beautiful film, heartbreaking yet hopeful, is a clarion cry to people everywhere. Wake up, get serious, meet, act together, act now. Wake up, get serious, meet, act together, act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for giving us a bit of the background that brought to the creation of this movie. And thank you for highlighting this aspect of a letter circulated and passed on from person to person, from heart to heart, in what you described as a conversation ongoing on the future of the planet. In this respect, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been at the heart of efforts to save the environment and our common home since I believe, the end of the 80s. And its work is crucial today in identifying and facing the challenges His Eminence just mentioned. I gladly pass the floor to President Husung Lee, the President of the Intergovernmental Panel, and I thank him for his presence here today.
Thank you very much. Today is a special day for the alliance between science and faith. Today is a special day for the alliance between science and faith. Today is a special day for the alliance between science and faith. As a representative of the scientific community, I'm thrilled to celebrate today two important milestones of the journey of the faith community to tackle the climate crisis. First, we celebrate the release of the film, The Letter, which powerfully tells the story of the encyclical letter Laudato Si. 7 years after Pope Francis wrote such a letter to all people of goodwill, this is a timely reminder of the urgency and importance of Laudato Si. It also is a great joy to see how the role of science gets such a big spotlight in the film through the story of Dr. Greg Asner and Dr. Robin Martin, a husband and wife team. Their groundbreaking research and mapping of coral reefs take place at the very front lines of the climate and biodiversity crisis. The IPCC assessments indicated that coral reef ecosystems are first in line to suffer catastrophic losses if greenhouse gas emissions remain unchecked and we cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature increase within the near future. In fact, as the film illustrates, such destruction of corals is happening right now in front of our eyes, very eyes, or rather in front of the eyes of scientists, as Dr. Asner and Dr. Martin. Pope Francis says in the film that, quote, "The theology in Laudato Si is in dialogue with science. Today, you could never practice theology without a dialogue with science," unquote. In fact, the encyclical itself is grounded, and I quote, on the results of the best scientific research available today, which touches deeply and provide a concrete foundation for the ethical and spiritual itinerary that follows.
What is the single most important thing we must do to avoid a climate disaster?
Well, the greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere, particularly CO2, stay there for thousands of years. And so it's really the sum of all those emissions are forcing the temperature higher and higher, which will have disastrous effects. And so we have to take these emissions, which are presently over 51 billion tons per year, and drive those all the way down to zero. And that's when the temperature will stop increasing and the disastrous weather events won't get worse and worse. So, it's pretty demanding. It's not a 50% reduction. It's all the way down to zero.
Unquote. This dialogue between faith and science is one we are eager. Laudato Si, paragraph 14. The IPCC assessments clearly point out that climate impacts and risks are becoming increasingly complex and more difficult to manage, and that accelerated and equitable climate action in mitigating and adapting to climate change is critical to sustainable development. In that regard, we warmly welcome the Holy See's official entry into the Paris Agreement on climate change. In that regard, we warmly welcome the Holy See's official entry into the Paris Agreement on climate change, which comes into force today. The Holy See's final commitment to this international body injects new momentum into the global race to implement solutions to the climate crisis. Our actions today will shape how people adapt and nature responds to increasing climate risks. I want to remind you that the next few years will be critical. They are a race to improve our chances of success. I should stress that international cooperation is key to achieving ambitious climate goals. Both the science community and faith community are very clear. The planet is in crisis and its life support systems are in peril. The stakes have never been higher, and we should be the source of the solution to this crisis. May the world receive this letter with an open heart and open mind. Thank you very much.
La parola al regista di questo grande lavoro, Nicolas Brown, whose precious work brought to the documentary we will all have the pleasure of watching this afternoon. Please, Director, a word on the work that has been done.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to thank my colleagues at Off the Fence, and especially want to thank all the contributors who have come back to Rome. We, as Cardinal Czerny mentioned, this exercise has been one of getting outside of our bubbles and meeting each other across the planet. And we have with us the four voices in the film, and we have with us the four voices in the film.
Yeah. è gioia e perciò crea bellezza. Le cattedrali non sono monumenti medievali, ma case di vita dove siamo a casa, incontriamo Dio, ci incontriamo uno l'altro. La grande musica, il gregoriano o Bach o Mozart, nella Chiesa non sono cose del passato, ma vivono della vitalità della liturgia della nostra fede. Se la fede è viva, la cultura cristiana non diventa passato, ma rimane viva e presente. E se la fede è viva, anche oggi possiamo rispondere all'imperativo che si ripete sempre di nuovo nei salmi.
Po filmu in po tej predstavitvi bo stojan svet imel podnebni dogovor kabala mafije, in sicer sedaj je bilo v Šarm el Šejku konferenca Združenih narodov o podnebnem dogovoru 2022. In kot boste videli, tudi ta film je imel izreden impakt oziroma vpliv na vse tam navzoče ljudi. Danes bomo imeli ta filmski večer, kjer piše sporočilo za naša srca. In je prišel ven. Na enem portalu sem gledal, je že preko 9 milijonov ogledov, v enem mesecu, kar je ogromno. Tako da gledajte, razumeti ta film pri takem sporočilu, kot je papež, kjer ima 1,5 milijarde rimokatoliških vernikov, ko ti ljudje dobijo to sporočilo, to je potem za ostalih 5-6 milijard metuljev efekt. Bodimo pozorni, da se bomo znali ogniti vsem pa s tem. Piše The Letter in The Film. In ta film je na pečatu papeža. Ali nas mislijo zapečatiti s tem filmom? Z pismom Laudato Si, kjer ponavadi se okrožnica daje s posebnim namenom, tokratna okrožnica je pa prvič v zgodovini namenjena vsem in vsakomur. Pol veste, kam ciljajo. Pri tem filmu za novo gibanje Laudato Si, in kot boste videli v filmu, vas zdaj že naprej opozorim, papež nagovori enega izmed igralcev: ti si šef popularnega gibanja, ali ne? In ta igralec, ki je njegov vernik, reče da. In vsak vernik mu bo rekel da. Zanimivo, a ne? Ti si šef popularnega gibanja, ne šef zdravega ali življenjskega, ampak popularnega. Zanimiva beseda. Predlagam, da pogledamo nekaj časa nazaj, kako je to izgledalo, in upam, da boste ob tej predstavitvi uživali, potem pride pa na vrsto film. Vidite, film The Letter ni samo film, ampak je postalo gibanje. Pravo gibanje, novo gibanje. In papež, kot boste videli potem v filmu, ki ga bomo predvajali, pravi, nagovarja vsakega izmed nas: ti si šef popularnega gibanja, ali ne? Tukaj v naslovu že lahko vidite, da je film, ki govori in nagovarja k dialogu in kliče k spremembi v srcu. Zdaj nas nagovarjajo že v srce, da bi sodelovali pri tej agendi. In film ima ravno ta namen. Tukaj bi se jaz osebno vprašal, zakaj dobri bogaboječi ljudje uspejo vedno le navidezno. Zaradi prijetnih, psihološko premišljenih in božajočih lažnih obljub bogatih psihopatov. Oprostite, da to zadevo tako imenujem, ampak drugače tega ne morem imenovati. Razlog za nastanek filma The Letter, v katerem nastopa v glavnem okrožnica Laudato Si, je večplasten. Pa si dajmo pogledati malček nazaj, zavrtimo čas nazaj in poglejmo na datum 13. marec 2013, ko je bil papež Frančišek izvoljen. In a veste kaj, po izvolitvi je takoj začel, nemudoma je začel s temeljito prenovo kurije. In tam je pogosto poudarjal, da vsi potrebujemo prenovo, torej tisto bolj pomembno prenovo srca. Evangelii Gaudium poziva k prenovi cerkve, k novemu izhodu iz zatohnelih prostorov. Zakaj je ta proces prenove tako pomemben za tega papeža, da jo na različnih področjih stalno omenja? Skozi zgodovino, in to je koncil ponovno prevzel, se cerkev, v latinščini rečeno semper reformanda, torej vedno se prenavlja, sicer počasi, vztrajno, toda vedno. In ena izmed temeljnih razsežnosti cerkve je, da vedno v procesu prenove, tako imenovanega spreobrnenja, nadaljuje notranje in zunanje spreobrnenje. Kako pa to počne v sodobnem času, si poglejmo pa v nadaljevanju. Takoj, ko je bil izvoljen, se je zgodila ena zadeva, ki je tudi mene presenetila, na katero v preteklosti nisem bil pozoren. 21. januarja 2014 se je papež že oglasil na Svetovnem gospodarskem forumu. Njegovo sporočilo je: zelo sem hvaležen za vaše prijazno vabilo, da spregovorim na letnem zasedanju Svetovnega gospodarskega foruma, ki je ponavadi v Davosu. Ker verjamem, da bo srečanje priložnost za globlji razmislek o vzrokih gospodarske krize, ki je prizadela svet zadnjih nekaj let, bi rad ponudil nekaj premislekov v upanju, da bodo obogatili razprave na forumu in dali koristen prispevek svojemu podnebnemu in pomembnemu delu. Potreben je torej prenovljen, poglobljen in razširjen občutek odgovornosti vseh. Biznis oziroma posel je pravzaprav poklic, in to plemenit poklic, pod pogojem, da tisti, ki se ukvarjajo z njim, vidijo izziv večjega smisla življenja. Biznis oziroma posel je pravzaprav poklic, in to plemenit poklic, pod pogojem, da tisti, ki se ukvarjajo z njim, vidijo izziv večjega smisla življenja. No, to je leta 2014 v Davosu povedal papež. Zanimivo pa je, da ko se je vrnil, gledajte, tukaj je 21. januar 14, ko se je vrnil nazaj v Rim, leto kasneje, je podlaga tega Laudato Si, mi signore, praise be to you, my lord, je izdal okrožnico Laudato Si. Enciklika Laudato Si svetega očeta Frančiška govori o skrbi za naše okolje kot njegovo vodilo in navdih, da je bil izvoljen za rimskega škofa. Vpliv Davosa je eno, opravičilo za nastanek Laudato Si, češ, da mu je bil navdih, da je bil izvoljen za rimskega škofa, se mi zdi, da je bolj za lase prevlečen. En razlog pač mora navesti. No, in tukaj pred nami je ta enciklika, ki je kar precej dolga. To se je pač zgodilo in lejte, 4 mesece kasneje je, to se pravi 17.9.2015, Radio Vatikan predstavil uradni prevod tudi v naš slovenski jezik. Tukaj okrožnica Laudato Si svetega Frančiška govori o skrbi za skupni dom. To so seveda naši cerkveni novinarji takoj povzeli, Laudato Si okrožnica tudi v slovenskem jeziku, kar se je zgodilo v četrtek 17. septembra 2015. To je bila katoliška novinarska konferenca, kjer so predstavili prevod Laudato Si v slovenski jezik. Zanimivo je, kaj so povedali na tej konferenci. Po predstavitvah je sledila pravzaprav razprava, v kateri so gostje poudarili, da je ena od specifik papeževe okrožnice tudi ta, da je namenjena vsem ljudem, saj se dotika problematik celotnega sveta. Če bi jo omejili samo na cerkev, bi zgrešili namen papeža, je zatrdil nadškof. V nadaljevanju so se dotaknili tudi vidika ekološke vzgoje, ki se mora začeti že v družini in šoli, temeljiti pa mora na zgledu staršev ter vzgojnih delavcev. Potreben je določen čas, da okrožnica obide v svet, ter da se prevede in prenese vernikom z obvestili ter branjem te okrožnice na raznih katehumenskih in drugih verskih srečanjih. To se pravi, to je bilo 2015, pokar je bila agenda nastavljena za leto 2016, pa jih je presenetila v bistvu informacija oziroma dejstvo, da je Trump postal novi ameriški predsednik, in sicer 9.11.2016, in po njegovi izvolitvi seveda so mu, jasno, kot se to spodobi, iskreno seveda čestitali. No, tukaj vidite STA Slovenija in povzetek raznih čestitk Trumpu ob njegovi izvolitvi, takrat, ki se je to zgodilo. Hillary Clinton, ki je bila njegova tekmica, in John Podesta, ki je vodil njeno kampanjo, pa je izjavil sledeče. Bila je dolga noč in dolga kampanja, vendar lahko rečem, da lahko še malo počakamo. Počakali so ta 4 leta in 15.1.2020 je papež pisal KLAUSU SCHWABU. Ker Svetovni gospodarski forum praznuje svojo 50. obletnico, pošiljam pozdrave in molitvene želje vsem udeležencem letošnjega srečanja. Zahvaljujem se vam za povabilo k sodelovanju in prosil kandidata oziroma kardinala Petra Turksona, prefekta dikasterija za spodbujanje celotnega človekovega razvoja, da se udeleži kot predstavnik Svetega sedeža. Naj vam povem, kaj pomeni dikasterij. Dikasteriji so najvišji upravni organi za določena področja v katoliški cerkvi, ki sestavljajo rimsko kurijo. Nastali pa so ravno v času papeža Frančiška in so bili kot kurialne enote uradno priznani z apostolsko konstitucijo Praedicate Evangelium, objavljeno 19. marca 2022. Dikasteriji so preprosto povedano ministrstva rimske katoliške cerkve in so nadomestili nekdanje kongregacije. Torej najprej so tele naredili dikasterije, uradno so jih pa seveda objavili 19. marca 2022. No in papež nadaljuje pismo predsedniku Svetovnega gospodarskega foruma KLAUSU SCHWABU in pravi: Svetovni gospodarski forum je v teh letih ponudil priložnost za sodelovanje različnih deležnikov pri raziskovanju inovativnih in učinkovitih načinov za izgradnjo boljšega sveta. Zagotovil je tudi prizorišče, kjer se politična volja in medsebojno sodelovanje lahko usmerjata in krepita pri premagovanju izolacionizma, individualizma in ideološke kolonizacije, ki je na žalost značilnost preveč sodobnih razprav današnjega časa. Papež je v bistvu potem preko svojega poslanika 21. januarja 2020 v središče postavil človeka na tem ekonomskem forumu preko svojega posrednika, in sicer pravi: človek je središče celotnega razvoja. Torej, ko se je v švicarskem Davosu začelo letno srečanje Svetovnega gospodarskega foruma, je papež voditelje svetovnega in javnega in zasebnega sektorja pozval k njihovi odgovornosti za celostni razvoj vseh, tako da postavijo človeka v središče politike. In človeka so dejansko postavili v središče maskiranja, zaprtosti, distanciranja, cepljenja, omejitev pri vseh temeljnih človekovih pravicah in še bi lahko našteval. Vse to je dobro za boljši svet, za integracijo človekovega razvoja, za skupno dobro in druge dobrote. Upam, da bodo njihova razmišljanja privedla do rasti solidarnosti, zlasti s tistimi, ki so najbolj potrebni, ki doživljajo socialne in ekonomske krivice in katerih obstoj je celo ogrožen. Seveda, brez dvoma so na tem Svetovnem gospodarskem forumu po moji oceni v imenu dobrega ogrozili ves svet. To se pravi, tukaj gre za tako imenovano njihovo demokracijo. Bodite pozorni, kadar rečejo demokracija ali pa naša demokracija. No, kaj se je potem dogajalo? Papež je potem 9. oktobra 2020 dal recept proti COVID-19. In tukaj se zgodba pravi, ni končala tako, kot je bilo mišljeno. Pazite, zgodba se ni končala tako, kot je bilo mišljeno, je zapisal papež Frančišek in s tem spretno izobčil približno pol stoletja trajajočo ekonomsko ideologijo. V osupljivi 43.000 besed dolgi encikliki je papež dal svoj pečat prizadevanjem za oblikovanje tega, kar imenujemo velika ponovna ponastavitev svetovnega gospodarstva kot odgovor na pustošenje COVID-19. Izdal je še eno encikliko, in sicer z naslovom Fratelli tutti, bratje vsi, vsi smo bratje, in s tem poziva k večjemu vsestranskemu sodelovanju med državami in poziva k reformi Združenih narodov, da bo pojem družine narodov lahko dobil pravi okvir in najšibkejšim med njimi je mogoče zagotoviti osnovne svoboščine na podlagi tega. Papež je takrat, mesec dni kasneje, Združene narode in države članice pozval k obnovitvi po COVID-19 na načine, ki bodo vključevali manj vojaških izdatkov in boljšo obravnavo beguncev in žensk. Ja, zdaj seveda vojske se bojijo, da jim infrastrukture ne zruši 5G, 6G, 7G, drugih stvari. Obravnavo beguncev in žensk pa poznamo, povsod se pojavlja masovno število beguncev in pa seveda mešanje narodov. To, kar je namen, zbegati nacionalne narode. In glejte, rezultat vsega tega je v bistvu ta ekonomski svetovni forum. Tukaj imate, poglejte, na levi strani, to so v bistvu kompletni načrti narejeni z ekonomskega foruma. Na desni strani tukaj se avtomatsko generirajo članki iz vsega sveta, takoj ko nastane nov članek, se tukaj zgenerira, tako da so vsi deležniki, vsi udeleženci takoj informirani o najnovejših stvarih. Zdaj pa k filmu The Letter. Zanimivo je, da so dali tukaj papežev pečat. Jaz ne vem, želijo s tem filmom zapečatiti celoten svet ali kako. Skratka, namen je že takšen. V filmu nastopajo 4 posamezniki, ki so v bistvu iz različnih koncev sveta, sever, jug, vzhod, zahod, tako da papež je potegnil kar križ čez cel svet, simbolično, s tem, ko je iz takšnih koncev sveta izbral posameznike, da se pravzaprav naredi sever, jug, vzhod, zahod, to se pravi križ. Film si bomo pogledali v Društvu za srečno življenje Belis zdajle in ocenili vatikansko komercialno sporočilo za Great Reset, ki ga promovira Klaus Schwab s svojim World Economic Forumom in naslovom The Letter oziroma pismo. Še eno podrobnost bi rad povedal, ki pa je ključna, da ta film ni namenjen samo vernikom in samo različnim ljudem po svetu, pač pa služi kot moralna podpora udeležencem na COP27. To so tudi tukaj zapisali. Namreč pretresljive slike in prizori iz filma Pismo, The Letter, kot bomo videli, so dokaj močno oblikovali letošnji COP27, ki se je odvijal 6. novembra. Tam so se zbrale vse delegacije in vlade v Egiptu. To je bila 27. konferenca pogodbenic okvirne konvencije Združenih narodov o klimatskih spremembah, znane bolj pod imenom The COP27. Med ključnimi srečanji in razpravami je film The Letter dal udeležencem, ki so si ga skupaj pogledali, spodbudo, da dvignejo moralno mejo za svoje ambicije pri upravljanju za zmanjševanje emisij fosilnih goriv. Predstavitveni dogodki in dokumentarna predstava filma The Letter so izpostavili ključne teme, kot so nesorazmeren vpliv krize na države v razvoju in pa, poslušajte, zavezništvo med vero in znanostjo ter vrednost katoliškega pogleda na predstavljeno podnebno krizo. Potrebno je soočenje COP27, ki ne bo samo preizkusil, ali se vlade lahko odzovejo na nujnost te krize, ampak tudi, ali lahko njihov dialog temelji na informacijah prič preživelih ob okoljski katastrofi. V samem filmu papež Frančišek spomni, da je raznolik dialog kot zbor, kjer moramo peti skupaj. In trenutno Enotnost pomeni rešiti mater zemljo, rešiti biotsko raznovrstnost, rešiti sebe in naše otroke. In sporočilo skupaj zaključi takole, tukaj na koncu nekako tako, skupaj morava peti. In trenutna enotnost pomeni rešiti mater zemljo, rešiti biotsko raznovrstnost, rešiti sebe in naše otroke. Papež Frančišek, pismo. Film Dileter je poleg propagande za vernike tudi močno orodje na tej konferenci in dviguje udeležencem moralo, kot je bilo to že povedano. Bi pa povedal, da je ta konferenca, ima tudi svojo spletno stran in o tem nam bo več povedal naš član Stojan Svet, ko si bomo film pogledali. Ob tem bi pa jaz poudaril samo še to. Tukaj obstaja združenje znanstvenikov iz celega sveta, kjer zatrjujejo, da ni klimatske, no climate emergency. Tako da na tej spletni strani lahko ugotovite tukaj, najdete vse fakte, vsa dejstva, resnično znanstvena dejstva, ne samo naštete stvari, v katere moraš slepo verjeti. In izdali so tudi tako imenovano svetovno deklaracijo, svetovno podnebno deklaracijo, v kateri trdijo, da there is no climate emergency. Zanimivo je, ker je to precej obsežen dokument, ima 48 strani in tlele noter so dejansko vsi podpisniki in iz vsake države je navedeno, se pravi so znanstveniki in profesionalci iz različnih držav in tudi podpisniki. Torej tukaj je vseh podpisnikov kar precej, tako da svet se zbuja, z njim se zbujamo tudi mi in upam, da nam bo ta v bistvu dokument hkrati lahko kot protiutež služil proti vsemu temu, kar se nam dogaja. Seveda je možno to tudi podpisati, lahko se prijavite tudi k temu in tako naprej. Tukaj je tudi ta forma, da lahko intenzivno sodelujemo vsi kot eden proti tej agendi. Papež pa seveda tudi uporablja družbena omrežja, Facebook, YouTube in drugo za svoj film, ki si ga bomo pa zdaj seveda pogledali. Toliko o tem.
Salut tout le monde, je m'appelle Bilal, c'est que le changement de climatique dafa dégager lu bëri fii nii nangu suñu kër yi yenn kër yi en plus que job yi bëriwul instant yi may testé pour mën a jaar si gaal yi pour mën a dem je l'ai fait avec mon meilleur ami mais ñu bëri dugg si clandestin bi dama ñëw après gisante ak benn gaan bi tegal ma ni ma gaal yi noonu la demee confiance la amoon quoi ak amoon yaakaar ak amoon yëg-yëg ak gëmoon ni on va réussir quoi. gaal gi si wàllu boppam dafa dem yoonam kenn gisul gaal ba léegi.
Cosa succede? E il peggio è che ci stiamo abituando a questo. Oggi sì, è affondato un barcone lì, tanti dispersi. Ma guarda che questo abituarsi
è una malattia grave.
Experts predict millions of people will be displaced by climate change in the next half-century.
Well, the UN spokesperson for migration confirming at least 74 people have lost their lives when a ship capsized in the deadliest sea crossing in the world.
All of these environment-related problems are increasing levels of migration in regions all around the world.
This is a defining challenge for our generation.
Already been displaced by the ever-rising sea levels.
Come è stato annunciato, sarà pubblicata una lettera enciclica. Questa enciclica è rivolta a tutti.
Well, the Vatican releases Pope Francis' wildly anticipated encyclical on the environment.
Late today, the leader of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics arrived for a final.
Never before has an official papal teaching letter been so widely praised and criticized. Thousands of police officers on duty for Francis's first full day right here in the Big Apple. The Pope reportedly agrees that global warming is real and that humans are to blame. There are still skeptics out there that say that, the Pope is not qualified or the Pope is not the authority.
So he's building off of a scientific literature. He's not attempting to be a scientist.
It's actually a reflection on the planet. It's a moral document.
It seems to me that the Pope is preaching politics from the pulpit. And that's something I'm not too
That the Pope is not pronouncing authoritatively on climate change.
Rather than fighting mythical forces. Terribly misinformed. He's doing a terrible disservice to the entire Catholic theology.
It's a most remarkable document.
He is way out of line.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off there.
It is an essential document for our time.
Laudato Si is a letter that Pope Francis has written to you. That usually gets people, they're going, Pope Francis didn't write me a letter. I say, oh yes, he did. He wrote you a letter. He wrote every person on the planet a letter to share his concerns about the state of the world. It's that simple, really. It's a letter from the Pope. We're going to be bringing together 4 of the different voices that Pope Francis has called specifically for in Laudato Si.
So we would like to invite, in the name of Pope Francis, a few representatives.
The voice of the poor, those at the peripheries, the voice of the indigenous peoples, the voice of the youth, and also the voice of nature, of wildlife.
Our idea is to invite all these people, bring them to the Vatican, and then having a dialogue together.
I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. I'm gonna write words so sweet. They're gonna knock me off of my feet. A lot of kisses on the bottom. I'll be glad I got 'em. I'm gonna smile and say, I hope you're feeling better. I'll close with love the way you do. I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter. And I'm gonna make believe it came from you. They're gonna knock me off of my feet. A lot of kisses on the bottom. I'll be glad I got 'em. Oh yeah! I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter. And I'm gonna make believe it came from you. Oh yeah, gonna make believe it came from you. Oh yeah.
Mana mu ram dah yo. Ram lah. Ya, mari kami. Baik je.
जी, तेरा लेटर आया।
कहाँ से देखो?
Which helps Pope. This custody for from me.
Wow.
Félicitations, amigo mío.
Ser alma.
Distíssimo chefe da DA.
Dear Ridhima Pandey.
Dear Robin Martin and Greg Asner, on behalf of all members of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development,
We salute you.
Ao incenso obrigatório para todos o que vocês fazem até agora.
In his own letter, Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet.
if you are willing, we can include your response as representative of the voice of the wildlife.
En tant qu'ambassadeur des pauvres,
A sua resposta como indígena.
Of the voices of the youth. You are invited to give your response in person.
In person?
Oi.
I think we're going to Rome.
We are very much looking forward to working together for a better future. Pope कौन है?
No entendía nada. Qué cosa extraña esto. ¿Qué tiene que ver la ecología con la evangelización? Decía un obispo que iba de una isla a otra a visitar sus comunidades y se encontró con un árbol que nacía del mar. Y se extrañó y le comentó al que llevaba la barca. Dijo, vea qué extraño esto. No, había una isla ahí y ya no está más. El cambio climático. En cierto momento sentí que tenía que decir una palabra, desde acá. Me reuní con algunos científicos y les pedí que delinearan bien los problemas claros. Después me reuní con un grupo de teólogos y le dije, ¿qué podemos decir sobre esto? Esto es grave. Y así nació Laudato Si. El clamor de la tierra y el clamor de los pobres no dan para más.
Burning
coal, oil and gas produces almost 90% of all human-produced CO2 emissions and is the main cause of climate change.
Africa is responsible for just 3% of global emissions. And yet, Africans are suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis.
Senegal is extremely vulnerable because of drought in the Sahel region.
Biyetem ko Haruna Kande, réfugié climatique. Jimina ko vinsa ko yero vinsa ko Mesiron ligade ligay wayna ligay ngesa ko be ngawi ko ala hindiyam kala gandunodo e rema ko demo gonnoda den cadele dalinoma. Mais c'est un manque de la protection de la nature qui pousse aujourd'hui de nos populations à quitter chez nous en venant dans les grandes villes comme Saint-Louis à Dakar. Nene am ceerno am ko kaw am kanko e nene am bokki di o ya inoron dumuna o yidi kam addude ndar mo ummi on ko e do e dum ko duubi jeego nde jotti mi dar ko mi damino yide o mi majji joni ho joni yirara famiyam J'ai fait l'Odara à Saint-Louis. Je mangeais pour survivre. J'ai grandi dans ces conditions jusqu'à l'âge de 12 ans. Tay kam ko ramina janga quoi. Be chankoro tay kam ramina janga. Issa est mon tuteur. C'est lui qui a créé l'organisation de l'ONG de Maison de la Gare. C'est une organisation qui a pour but non lucratif, qui aide les talibés à s'intégrer dans la vie. Mina fiɓi yaade ron mina fiɓi yaade université ɗum ko anni e wonni e ɓernde amen hinde noon ndi noon ko mina ɗamini min ko hem mbokkami e ɓen. Actuellement à Saint-Louis, la mer avance de plus en plus vers les localités. ɓattorta galleji ɗi ha yahi joni gañima ɓañi joni place o fof. jiɗi joni sa yahi han presque ko ndiyam ɓurɗi koɗi joni. ndiyam ɗam ɓaŋino galleji maɓɓe ɗi ɓe ngala galleji ɗi janino ngalaɗo kodi ɓen ko état ittuno naɓi men o nokkuru on fewnani men tantije bas ɗo ɗo ɓe mbaɗa. ɓe mbi o jo keɗen mi luɓo lawol ngol ganduɗa komi ndewatɗo galji ɗo mi jaa oro mi tawoya wonɓe Europe. Mais je sais, le changement climatique rend notre pays pauvre. Le fait que ma gis si tour Barça ak Barça lu muy tekk ban message nga bëgg jàllale en fait quoi.
moo tax jeunes yu bëri dañuy foog ne balaa ñuy dem balaa ñuy jógee si côte yi lii la ñuy wax Barça wala Barça. Barça mooy Barcelone parce que bateau yu bëri foofu la ñuy teeree. Barça mooy dee.
mooy dee.
waaw. ci sama xalaat daal mooy. na xale yëpp toog fii Afrique parce que am na bëri lu ñu war a liggéey fii soo demee fee lan ngay am doo def dara loo am nga suturloo si. loolu daal mooy message bi mooy message bi bateau bi.
fii de war naa fi indi sama élément yi quoi comme ça ñu ñëw xool affaire yi.
am na solo.
rafet na trop quoi.
waaw jërëjëf.
te si a yettima ro nan kadi mi wagginima konngol gandina paɓo pap gondorongo wondema pour yimɓe mbaɗa protéger l'environnement o ɗum ko religion ji ɗi fof kaaɗim l'islam e jati hoore mo haalim o yimɓe leɓe na mbat toppoto ladde nde yimɓe leɓe na mbat toppoto environnement o hay hunde warna yakke. Je veux rester au Sénégal et j'encourage aussi à toute ma communauté à ne pas émigrer.
Eu sou o cacique Dadá, da terra indígena Maró. O meu território, ele é composto, o tamanho dele é 42.372 hectares de terra. coração fica batendo, porque eu penso que é mais energia que é passada através de uma carta. E que a gente possa fazer esse laço de amizade e tentar, junto, correr em busca da demarcação da terra indígena Maró. O povo acredita em um Deus que é chamado de Tupã para nós. É aquele todo-poderoso que está no céu. É aquele que cuida de todo mundo. Então é aquele que cuida do índio, do papa, do negro, do branco e de todos. Para mim a floresta ela tem um significado muito grande. Para mim a floresta não deixa de ser uma casa. Uma casa bonita, uma casa grande. A partir de 2002 acabou nosso sossego. Porque aí vai chegar as empresas madeireiras, vão lotear todos os lotes dela, vão titular, vão fazer os manejos e nós vamos ficar, se nós não se organizar para defender um pedaço de terra, nós vamos ficar sem terra.
4 land and environmental defenders have been murdered every week. Last year was the bloodiest year on record, with 212 people killed for standing up for their land, for standing up to protect our environment, and for standing up to their rights.
Então, aqui nessa região, ela acontece muito isso, né? E assim, eu falo com toda sinceridade, eu ando, mas eu ando com medo. Hoje eu retornei aqui nesse lugar que eu nunca gostaria, eu sempre passo aqui, mas nunca gostei, parei para vir aqui porque isso aqui me traz umas lembranças muito ruins. Eu me deparei com um carro por 2 pessoas que já foram abrindo o carro e me colocando arma sobre a minha cabeça. Eles me amarraram no tronco de uma árvore. Aí ele veio e deu um chute desse lado aqui na minha costela. Aí depois bateu desse outro lado aqui. Aí foi a hora que eu apaguei. Se não fosse Tupã, não fosse o espírito da floresta, eu hoje não estava aqui forte. Porque parte da sociedade brasileira, ela está transformando a Amazônia no grande mercado financeiro. Ela só vê a Amazônia pelo lado capitalista. Acha que a Amazônia só pode se desenvolver se você estiver extraindo o grande minério que está nela, a grande madeira que está nela. Mas não está aí preocupado em plantar, não está preocupado em preservar. Mas o meu maior medo aqui é perder a terra, a floresta, com o grande agronegócio que está chegando aí. O plantio da soja mecanizada, o plantio do arroz mecanizado. Aí não tem mais para nós.
¿Cuántos defensores del ambiente terminaron asesinados? ¿Cuántos? O terminaron silenciados. En historia estudiamos cómo la civilización nos liberó de la esclavitud. Es una mentira más grande que esta casa. El progreso, entre comillas, que hoy estamos siguiendo, la supremacía de lo económico, nos hace cada vez más esclavos. Y ahora no solo a nosotros, sino a la casa común, a la naturaleza.
Ridhima vows to keep the fight on.
जो मेन जिम्मेदारी है वो गवर्नमेंट की है कि वो but it's like when it comes to ground reality.
The next person on the stage is the wonderful young girl, Ridhima Pani. Come on, she deserves a very round of applause. The youngest speaker that we have with us.
I never expected to receive a letter from Pope. It's like never in my life. I never even, thought of that it could be a thing. It makes me feel a little special kind of a person.
Ridhima Pandey is one among the 16 children who filed a complaint to protest against the lack of government action to tackle the climate crisis.
I'm here because I want all the global leaders to do something to stop climate change, because if it's not going to be stopped, it's going to harm our future. So if we want to stop global warming, we have to do something now. I won't let this fight die down. Trust me.
Creo que la fuerza más grande la tienen los movimientos populares y los jóvenes. O sea, de ahí tiene que venir lo nuevo. La organización, los jóvenes.
And now, release it. Every single time when I talk to the kids from any part of the world, the one thing that I found common amongst all our stories is that climate change has impacted and is still impacting our life in one way or the other. Hi.
So we just found out that the out-of-control bushfire is going to come up and reach the ridge that we live on. The winds just changed. It's really sudden.
Oh my God.
We're just hoping and praying that the wind doesn't pick up so that it doesn't completely destroy our house. We're going to go and we have to go get our dogs and chickens from the house and just start preparing.
Super smoky. There's ash falling out of the sky. All right, let's roll.
Heavy rains have triggered deadly floods and landslides. Several people have been killed so far.
In 2013, the Kedarnath flash flood happened. After seeing those things, I started having these nightmares. When it comes to climate change, my generation is the most vulnerable right now, and we are going to be the most affected in the future as well.
La verdadera revolución es constructiva siempre. Y cuando uno ya está instalado en la vida, le cuesta imaginar. Los jóvenes de ahora son los que pueden gritar. Jóvenes desinstalados.
Dear Mother Earth, I am raising my voice against the polluters, the policymakers, and the governments who are responsible for this destruction. We youth must bring a positive change to heal you, to save you, and to save your beauty as well as our future.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wave at 92 FM, Hawaii's #1 hit music station. We've got a special treat for you. Husband and wife team who are leading the way in coral protection, Dr. Greg Asner and Dr. Robin Martin. Guys, how are you doing today? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
On a global scale, corals are in trouble. We've had two major marine heat waves. That's these heat waves in the ocean. We weren't ready, we didn't have a lot of data, and we mobilized. So we do a very high-tech style of environmental mapping. We take off and we're flying over our coral reef, and the computers and the instrumentation on board the plane are collecting up these images as we fly over. These instruments are like fancy cameras that are pointing out of the bottom of the plane.
This shows our progression as we fly across the reef, and each one of these passes is more than a diving team can do in a year.
But really what our mapping is that makes it so unique is our ability to see the biodiversity, see the actual organisms that are making up the ecosystem. And we've created technology on board my aircraft that allows us to probe these ecosystems and that helps us to create information about the seafloor, including the corals. That information in the instrumentation on the plane has to be interpreted in some way. And so Robin comes into the picture by going into the ocean and relating what we see in the plane with the corals on the seafloor itself.
So Greg's team right now is heading over us, coming up over the boat right now.
So this is showing our real-time display as we're flying over Robin.
My office is one of the coolest places on Earth. Coral reefs are like the rainforest of the sea. They provide habitat, they provide food, they provide shoreline protection. They're a living, growing organism that grows out of the bottom of the ocean.
As ecologists, we look at nature as species, organisms that are interacting, and that one doesn't exist well without the other. Problems like climate change disrupt these interactions between species.
These marine heat waves are causing an unknown amount of death among corals. These dark bands show the live coral. The oranges are still live coral, but less of it. And the yellow is very little live coral cover, but it gives you a history of what we lost in the shallower parts of the reef. But we did learn in 2015 that we lost at least 25% of our corals statewide. By July 2019, we started seeing this heat wave arriving again.
Unlike forest fires where we know we put water on it to put it out, we have no idea what to do about these heat waves in terms of putting them out.
La teología que hay en Laudato Si está en diálogo con la ciencia. Hoy y nunca se puede hacer teología sin diálogo con la ciencia. Más aún, Dios nos dio esta capacidad de la investigación, esta capacidad intelectual de buscar las verdades. Obviamente que la narración bíblica de la creación es una forma mítica de expresar lo que ha sucedido.
Although I don't practice religion, the experiences that one has underwater or in this world, if you take the time to just be quiet and listen and look, make you always wonder who's in charge and how everything got here.
If you live below the waterline, you have no voice. And so it's up to us to bring some of that voice above the surface. It's not easy to do.
If you just look at the science, and having been an environmental activist for so many years, like, you look at the science and you can despair. But we also need the stories. We need the narratives that faith brings, the motivation in order to take action.
Every major faith has taken up the challenge of addressing the environmental crises, and they do so through their stories and their narratives. And one of the things that the faiths have always known is you've got to be dealing with the spectrum of human issues, not just with one single issue. The first big meeting of the faiths with the major environmental groups was in 1986 in Assisi, in Italy, the birthplace of St. Francis. We had all the major conservation and environmental groups there, and we had representatives of the 5 major religions.
Laudato Si and the theology that underpins Laudato Si is about calling us into a deeper communion with the natural world. In the way that Pope Francis starts this encyclical, well, he calls it Laudato Si, praise be, from the Canticle of Creation. But then the whole first chapter, practically, is dedicated to St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis, as a mystic, had that intuition of the created world. And that's something, at its very deepest, I think that's where Laudato Si offers something so unique.
There has never been an invitation from a pope to the rest of the religious world and the secular world to become partners side by side in addressing a major issue. That is unique. That's the turning point.
Pope Francis really calls in Laudato Si for an urgent dialogue with those who are suffering from the effects of climate injustice, those who are not listened to.
Queridos poetas sociales, porque ustedes son poetas sociales porque tienen la capacidad y el coraje de crear esperanza allí donde solo aparece descarte y exclusión. Gracias por hacerme parte del proceso histórico que están transitando. Un diálogo que nace en las periferias, un diálogo que llega a Roma y en el que todos podemos sentirnos invitados e interpelados. Son parte fundamental de esa humanidad que lucha por la vida frente a un sistema de muerte.
Robin and I are ready. We want to go and do this because it's so important. So much is at stake.
J'ai grandi dans une société là où on ne considère pas les talibés. Donc je n'ai jamais imaginé que j'aurais un jour l'occasion de recevoir des invitations comme le pape. Non plus que des gens intellectuels de haut niveau qui n'ont pas eu de ce sens-là.
xool rek nu réew mi bindoo xool da ngay xool rek. xoolal lii rek ça date des siècles. fii train bi daf fiy jaar ci digg tali bi.
fii de.
waaw.
après ñeneen ñi borom oto yi nu ñuy dem.
bureau bu gars yi dañuy taxaw.
ñii de lii
ku nekk da nga respecté sa morom la.
lii ku ko defoon Sénégal population bi yëpp ngay rey benn jour.
A nossa vinda não é uma visita, é uma aula, é um trabalho, tem sentido, tem muita coisa que a gente vai mudar. O mundo vai mudar, porque o que estava encoberto hoje está sendo descoberto.
maanaam réew Sénégal la quoi en fait c'est un réew sénégalais. njàng ñi rafet na de. jaajëf jaajëf dellu ziar. mais naka ngeen ñëwee yéen di ngeen di ñëw.
gaal lañ jël bi ñuy ñëw.
gaal
libi laa jaar libi laa jaar.
yow libi
lañ jaar.
Barça wala Barça.
Barça wala Barça.
So first thing to say is a huge welcome to all of you. I have been a campaigner on environmental issues, social justice. I think since I was your age, around that time. Our coming together today is partly in response to this. This little book, Laudato Si, Pope Francis wrote this for every person on the planet.
Wow.
And I know that each of you received a letter of invitation. So Pope Francis meets with people from the peripheries all the time. It's kind of like his bread and butter. But what we're trying to do here is to bring together the different peripheries into dialogue, and that's quite unique. We're going to do a rehearsal now, okay? Now, if we all stand up, so then if Pope Francis wants to come in here, who's the Pope?
Buongiorno, Santo Padre. Sono Lorna dell'Irlanda, del movimento Laudato Si.
The Green.
The Green Island.
Bom dia. Assim que eu dei terra indígena maior, Amazônia.
Amazônia, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Rhythm, India.
India.
Botswana, Robin Martin, Hawaii.
Holy Father Greg Asler from Hawaii. Buongiorno. Senegal. Senegal, yeah.
Aqui quero lhe entregar esse presente. Aqui no lado, o grafismo, a carta.
Holy Father, this is the drum I know, and this is what I imagine. This is our Mother Earth.
Thank you.
This image of Earth taken last week, but also this, importantly, shows where the climate is changing.
Ça montre comment la jeunesse traverse de la Méditerranée pour entrer en Europe.
Et à la place de Saint-Peter, il y a une sculpture d'un bateau de migrants et je voudrais que vous le voyez.
Bien sûr.
¿Tecnología ecológica o no?
Bom dia, a Vossa Santidade. Venho aqui representando as falas de todos os indígenas do Brasil. Falo traduzindo as palavras da nossa grande Mãe Terra, que hoje pede socorro na Amazônia e todo o Brasil. Muito obrigado.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today about the global biodiversity crisis and for all of the unheard voices of wildlife.
We need your help. As scientists, we realize that science can't solve the biodiversity crisis or the climate crisis alone. Science is a toolkit, but we need much more than tools.
Dans mon pays, à la réchauffement climatique de notre planète. Et aujourd'hui, la population a déplacé de leur ville, de leur village pour venir dans les grandes villes. Ce déplacement aujourd'hui nous a causé, nous a poussé aujourd'hui à devenir des talibés, marcher dans les rues, pieds nus. Et donc, si je suis là, votre sainteté aujourd'hui, c'est pour trouver une solution. Comment faire pour lutter contre cette injustice? Comment faire pour lutter les problèmes qui gangrènent notre planète?
Today I am here in front of you to represent the voices of the youth because our future is in danger. We are not getting the life that we deserved. The older generation inherited this world in a way like it was beautiful, it was livable, it was a world that I wanted, but they have destroyed it for their profit. Thank you.
Ustedes saben que esas imágenes bíblicas son históricas con significado mítico, es decir, para ayudarnos también a captar los valores. Se estaba construyendo la Torre de Babel. Se decía que la soberbia humana en aquel momento quería llegar hasta dónde, no sé. Y los ladrillos los hacían tantos trabajadores. Si se caía un ladrillo, era castigado brutalmente el obrero que lo dejó caer. Si se caía un obrero, no pasaba nada. Suplían con otro y seguían con el trabajo. Y esta es la clave de interpretación de lo que sucede hoy. Estamos construyendo una torre de soberbia humana, con ladrillos de poder, con ladrillos de economía. Y para construir eso trabaja tanta gente como esclavos. Y si se cae un esclavo no pasa nada. Pero hemos dado un paso más. Si se cae la naturaleza no pasa nada. La soberbia económica, la soberbia del poder de unos pocos, que usa todo, usa la gente, usa la naturaleza, usa todo y destruye. Estamos viendo en este verano los incendios. Estamos viendo cómo los ciclones, los terremotos, cómo la naturaleza se empieza a quejar. La naturaleza grita. Deténganse. Deténganse. Perdón, sto parlando in spagnolo, ma i traduttori possono tradurlo se va? Non me ne sono accorto. E parlavo del cuore. Il cuore è spagnolo. Continuo con lo spagnolo. Va bene. Creo que el grito de libertad en este momento tiene que venir por el lado de las nuevas generaciones, a las cuales hay que hacerle tomar conciencia, porque ustedes van a heredar esta tierra. Tenemos son los movimientos juveniles, los movimientos populares. El pueblo tiene su sabiduría. Tú eres cacique de un movimiento popular, ¿no es cierto? Entonces, sí. Y los científicos apoyando siempre eso, ¿no? O sea, diciendo, tienen razón en esto, tienen... O sea, pero esto es un coro, acá tenemos que cantar todos juntos, ¿no? Y la unidad en este momento es la de salvar la madre tierra, ¿no? Y salvar la biodiversidad y salvarnos a nosotros mismos y salvar a nuestros hijos, ¿no? Pero no descartar a nadie, o sea, ante una política del descarte nosotros no descartamos. Cada uno en su país, en su pueblo, en su cultura, tiene que buscar la manera de poder hacerlo. Y a todos juntos, todos juntos.
Humanity has lived on this planet and watched it and observed it for thousands of years. We've learnt a lot. We didn't call it ecology. We didn't call it conservation. We just felt that somehow here there was something more wonderful and mysterious and majestical and powerful at work. So we called it sacred. And I think we need to bring that sacred back. Tapping into that deep need to feel that there are some places where the veil between heaven and earth is gossamer thin.
Laudato si, mi Signore, con tutte le tue creature. Specialmente Messer lo frate Sole. Laudato si, mi Signore, per Sora Luna e le stelle. Laudato si, mi Signore, per frate Vento, et Aere, et Nubilo, et Sereno, et omne tempore. I am a little taken, moved, because the first time I see this relic. St. Francis had a special attraction to rocky places like this one. In complete solitude, he needed to renew his contact with the very source of his life. He needed the contact with the absolute, the transcendent. It's meaningful for everybody, not just for believers or Christians. So we need to have a transcendent reason to care for the creation.
Habemus Papa Franciscum.
Francis. It's the first Francis in the history of the Catholic Church.
It is fair to say, by the reaction in the square of St. Peter's, they are stunned.
This is a stunner. This is a stunner.
Nobody dared to take the name of Francis because it's a challenge. It means that you will follow in the steps of St. Francis.
Nell'elezione io ho pensato a Francesco di Assisi e così è venuto il nome nel mio cuore. Francesco di Assisi, l'uomo della povertà, l'uomo della pace, l'uomo che ama e custodisce il creato. In questo momento in che noi abbiamo col creato una relazione non tanto buona, no?
Laudato Si, mi Signore, per frate sole. I can say, even in my small way, that this is what I have experienced in my life as a Franciscan. The joy of possessing nothing, but enjoying everything. The creation doesn't belong to us. We have received it. We are not owners of nature.
Y Francisco es un hombre de la escucha. Escuchó la voz de Dios, escuchó la voz del pobre, escuchó la voz del enfermo, escuchó la voz de la naturaleza. Y deseo que la semilla de Francisco crezca en tantos corazones.
But you really have to go to Assisi to get a sense of the real Francis. This message of St. Francis of love for nature, a concern for social justice for the poor. And then it says here, Laudato Si, mi Signore, per la sora luna e le stelle, for the sister moon and the stars. And this one here is St. Francis. Looking at the stars, I imagine.
Yeah, his eyes are
lying
open.
down, his eyes are wide open. So to go up the stairs.
Com relação ao Papa, fiquei muito feliz pela exposição de cada um.
It went by too fast for me, and I just keep replaying it like, oh, I wish I could have done that or said that or asked this, right?
Yep. Got you.
Oh, there's somebody walking in at the other side. Yeah.
I was feeling my legs shaking and I was not able to figure out what happened like the whole day.
That's the essence of it. It's perfectly imperfect, even with the Pope. It's human, so.
O nosso encontro com o Papa está dando uma repercussão muito grande. Lá no nosso estado, no nosso município, saiu no jornal local, um canal de televisão, que o mundo todo lá. Agora, os caras, para me matarem, eles vão pensar 2 vezes, os caras que me ameaçam. Porque eles sabem que eu não estou mais lutando só. A minha luta não está mais só.
Francis hanging out.
We're seeing the stars.
Salam alaikum, salut tout le monde. maa leen nuyu yéen ñëpp ku si nekk sa tur sa sant quoi. Man la Bilal Seck. Je suis là pour partager avec vous mon histoire. Instant yi may testé pour mën a jaar si gaal yi pour mën a dem. Je l'ai fait avec mon meilleur ami. Confiance la amoon quoi. Ak amoon yaakaar ak amoon yëg-yëg. Ak gëmoon ni on va réussir quoi. Mais dafa nekk gaal boo xam ne projet la te on m'a dit que projet du xasee ba commencé di dugal ndox day commencé dugal ndox di dem rek day diig mais gaal gi bant bi gisatuñ ko je t'assure loo xamante ni tey métti na trop plus de 24 heures noonu si woon si kaw ndox bi di jaayante. si biir guddi si man ak sama benn boy bi si biir guddi si nañ réeroo léegi boy bi mu ngi may yuuxu si biir guddi si man maa ngi koy yuuxu. man maa ngi dóor ndox bi sax pour mu mën a gis mais non mënul gis parce que lëndëm la ba mu des maa 2 boy si biir guddi si booy demoon nañ ba mu bili instant yi moment bii nu nekkee nii moment bi amul leneen loo xamante ni nii moo fi sës lu dul dee wallahi billahi ma leen non même pas. il m'a beaucoup manqué quoi. si yàlla ko yàlla yërëm te xaale ko àjjana. parce que si nañ dem juste ñun nelawoon nañ si kaw ndox bi nelaw ba dugg si biir ndox bi billaay tourné rek juste gis benn gaal buy nekk foofu noonu di napp léegi def foofu yàlla rek moo doon wan dara quoi mais si la yàlla ñëw ak yërmandeem gaal bi ñëw sauvé nu su guddi si te yàlla ko yàlla xaare àjjana kii di Bas ba di Jaw Braya ak Demba da ko defoon pour juste pour mën a changer suñu dund mën a nekk si leneen quoi mu nekk mais sant yàlla tey ba mën a toog di koy waxtaane ak yéen.
J'ai été pas reconnu avant de mon voyage. Déjà, on est une famille. Je ne vous considère pas comme des amis, je vous considère déjà comme une famille. Donc il faut lisser des liens très forts et il ne faut jamais rompre ce lien. Mais ce voyage m'a permis actuellement de s'engager davantage dans l'avenir, d'être prêt à n'importe quel combat.
I would just say one thing to Aruna. He said he was not famous. And it really feels because he has suffered a lot. In a way, it's just like my story is that I used to get nightmares. But I guess I only had nightmares. But you have living worse than that. And one thing I can promise is that you are my hero. You are so famous for me.
Et actuellement, les daras sont remplis. Il y a une inondation. Les enfants n'ont même pas place assez pour dormir. Et ils restent pendant la nuit. Ils restent debout durant toute la nuit. Pourquoi? Parce que les daras sont remplis d'eau. Nous avons reçu des informations. Avant-hier, il y avait un gars qui avait rempli plus de 200 ans pour traverser la mer, venir en Europe.
Aruna, we stood before that boat and you unveiled a picture, and it's a reality. It makes me so angry because we don't know how to help. Once you know, you cannot look away. You cannot look away.
Se tiver que fazer alguma coisa, é enquanto nós estamos falando. Se nós tiver que ajudar ele aqui, é enquanto ele está vivo, enquanto ele está falando, enquanto ele tem força para lutar. E a gente acaba tomando a dor do outro, porque o sofrimento de um é de todos nós.
Though half of of life is gone for good, and we haven't acted as we should. You feel it in your heart of wood that this is far from over. Shorelines gone and maps destroyed, livelihoods dissolved and void, entire languages unheard, and still it's far from over. Be sure you teach your kids to swim and navigate by stars above. The fate of landlocked life is grim when you ignore our will to love. When all that's left is sea and sun, a lonely voice says all's not done. It's your child who will be the one to sing it's far from over. The whole world's far from over.
I feel like we arrived as individuals with very different stories, very different backgrounds, strangers in a way. But we all shared a dream.
It's like an orchestra. An orchestra works precisely because it's diverse. Each with their own contribution.
When I think about Pope Francis's contribution, it's huge, it's enormous, and it needs to go far outside of the Catholic Church, far outside of Christianity, far outside among many belief systems. And the amplification can't be what I know or what you know or what you know or what you know, it's what we know.
If we can form alliances that stretch across different movements, we could still make a change. There is hope.
Je n'arrive pas à rester tranquille. Parfois, j'ai un esprit qui voyage. Ma vision sur le futur du Sénégal, si on continue sur cette même lancée, pour comment faire reboiser la nature, pour organiser des campagnes de reboisement.
A Amazônia, ela não depende só de mim, ela depende de cada um de vocês que estão aí, ela depende de ti. E para que ela seja verde, todos nós precisa cuidar dela.
It really has changed my perspective. I think it's going to define the rest of my career, my life.
Everybody had their story, but everybody's story is the story of today.
And the latest report by the United Nations Climate Science Agency has declared that it is now or never.
Marches have been taking place in more than 200 cities around the globe for what's billed as a global day of action for climate justice.
We know what to do, we know how to do it, and now it's up to us to take action.
Taking action for climate crisis, try to be the change you want to see in the world.
We are now at the crossroads of humanity having the opportunity to go one way or the other.
Abbiamo tutti bisogno gli uni degli altri, che nessuno di noi è un'isola, che possiamo costruire il futuro solo insieme, senza escludere nessuno.
Poznam starše, ki naredijo za svoje otroke vse. Popolnoma vse in še več. Poznam tudi otroke, ki za svoje starše naredijo vse. Imamo dve kategoriji. Starše, ki so stari, in otroke, ki so mladi. In v tem filmu nastopa en starček in veliko mladih. Vprašam se, kako bi izgledal film, če bi papež k sebi povabil Bill Gatesa, Jeff Bezosa, Marka Zuckerberga, mogoče Elona Muska, pa da bi jih Klaus Schwab pripeljal v svojem najnovejšem električnem avtomobilu, o čem bi se tam pogovarjali. To se sprašujem po tem filmu, kakšen bi bil efekt. Ko sem pripravljal temo, sem spregledal eno stvar, na katero sem bil pozoren sedaj med gledanjem. In sicer zanimivo, kaj je papež rekel. Stvarjenje, opisano v Svetem pismu, je mitično, glede na današnjo znanost. To je rekel v filmu dvakrat. Če je to v resnici mislil, je dejansko zanikal Boga, je zanikal stvarjenje, je zanikal Sveto pismo in najhujše zanikal lastno papeško poslanstvo v celoti. Kaj so mu ponudili, da je padel na kolena? Kaj so mu ponudili, da je šel tako daleč od resničnega Boga in se izenačil z neko psevdo znanostjo, z nekimi lažnimi obljubami, pri katerih sodeluje? To je moje vprašanje. Zdaj pa predlagam, da si pogledamo nadaljevanje tega filma. Zakaj so mogli poiskati nove 4 igralce, zakaj so mogli poiskati tudi novo Greto, bomo pa videli tukaj potem v nadaljevanju v sekvenci teh filmov.
Welcome to the biggest climate session at Davos, Averting a Climate Apocalypse. I'm Rebecca Blumenstein, Deputy Managing Editor of the New York Times. This has already been a momentous day, and this is a very critical discussion to have now. It's been a year of prominent headlines on climate. Our job at the Times is to show it, not just to write it. The Australian fires consumed an area larger than the size of the entire state of West Virginia, and smoke from the fires was seen even in Chile. There's been record heat, droughts, flooding. It has now been officially confirmed that the past decade was the hottest on record. 2020 is an absolutely pivotal year for our world's climate. Some are even calling it the year of truth. 5 years after the Paris Accord, governments need to reset their goals, and businesses are finally and quickly talking about setting goals. We're running out of time to limit warming to 1.5 degrees and to avoid 2 degrees. Scientists say we need to keep warming below 1.5 to avoid the very worst impacts on all of us. And the more we delay, the harder it becomes. We have top voices from across the world to discuss the urgency of the situation and next steps. But we are going to start with some words from Greta Thunberg, who made headlines around the world last year by saying here at Davos that our house is on fire. I am so honored to welcome her to the stage.
Sorry. 1 year ago, I came to Davos and told you that our house is on fire. I said I wanted you to panic. I've been warned that telling people to panic about the climate crisis is a very dangerous thing to do. But don't worry, it's fine. Trust me, I've done this before, and I can assure you it doesn't lead to anything. And for the record, when we children tell you to panic, we're not telling you to go on like before. We're not telling you to rely on technologies that don't even exist today at scale and that science says perhaps never will. We are not telling you to keep talking about reaching net zero emissions or carbon neutrality by cheating and fiddling around with numbers. We're not telling you to offset your emissions by just paying someone else to plant trees in places like Africa, while at the same time forests like the Amazon are being slaughtered at an infinitely higher rate. Planting trees is good, of course, but it's nowhere near enough of what is needed, and it cannot replace real mitigation and rewilding nature. And let's be clear, we don't need a low-carbon economy. We don't need to lower emissions. Our emissions have to stop if we are to have a chance to stay below the 1.5-degree target. And until we have the technologies that at scale can put our emissions to minus, then we must forget about net zero. We need real zero. Because distant net zero emission targets will mean absolutely nothing if we just continue to ignore the carbon dioxide budget that applies for today, not distant future dates. If high emissions continue like now, even for a few years, that remaining budget will soon be completely used up. The fact that the USA is leaving the Paris Accord seemed to outrage and worry everyone, and it should. But the fact that we are all about to fail the commitments you signed up for in the Paris Agreement doesn't seem to bother the people in power even the least. Any plan or policy of yours that doesn't include radical emission cuts at the source starting today is completely insufficient for meeting the 1.5 or well below 2-degree commitments of the Paris Agreement. And again, this is not about right or left. We couldn't care less about your party politics. From a sustainability perspective, the right, the left, as well as the center have all failed. No political ideology or economic structure has been able to tackle the climate and environmental emergency and create a cohesive and sustainable world. Because that world, in case you haven't noticed, is currently on fire. You say children shouldn't worry. You say, just leave this to us. We will fix this. We promise we won't let you down. Don't be so pessimistic. And then, nothing. Silence. Or something worse than silence. Empty words and promises which give the impression that sufficient action is being taken. All the solutions are obviously not available within today's societies, nor do we have the time to wait for new technological solutions to become available to start drastically reducing our emissions. So, of course, the transition isn't going to be easy. It will be hard, and unless we start facing this now, together with all cards on the table, we won't be able to solve this in time. In the days running up to the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum, I joined a group of climate activists demanding that you, the world's most powerful and influential business and political leaders, begin to take the action needed. We demand at this year's World Economic Forum participants from all companies, banks, institutions and governments immediately halt all investments in fossil fuel exploration and extraction, immediately end all fossil fuel subsidies, and immediately and completely divest from fossil fuels. We don't want these things done by 2050, 2030, or even 2021. We want this done now. It may seem like we are asking for a lot, and you will, of course, say that we are naive. But this is just the very minimum amount of effort that is needed to start the rapid sustainable transition. So either you do this, or you're going to have to explain to your children why you are giving up on the 1.5 degree target. Giving up without even trying. Well, I'm here to tell you that, unlike you, my generation will not give up without a fight. The facts are clear, but they are still too uncomfortable for you to address. You just leave it because you think it's too depressing and people will give up. But people will not give up. You are the ones who are giving up. Last week, I met with Polish coal miners who lost their jobs because their mine was closed. And even they had not given up. On the contrary, they seem to understand the fact that we need to change more than you do. I wonder, what will you tell your children was the reason to fail and leave them facing a climate chaos that you knowingly brought upon them? That it seemed so bad for the economy that we decided to resign the idea of securing future living conditions without even trying? Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour. And we are telling you to act as if you loved your children above all else. Thank you.
Torej, za kreacijo epidemije, za kreacijo pandemije so predavali novinarjem, potrebuješ na začetku enega okuženega. Zero, začetek, kraj, človek, virus. Kasneje se to razširi lokalno, potem pokrajinsko, državno in svetovno. In tukaj smo bili priča enemu takemu virusu. En otrok, ki govori 2020, 120 liderjem najmočnejšim v svetu, ki ga uporabi še višja sila, mu napiše govor in ta otrok potem to pove v takem čustvenem nagovoru vsem, da jih gane v srce. Dobro, kako zgleda to, ko se iz svetovnega foruma ta isti otrok preseli v Evropski parlament? Poglejmo.
I want you to act as if the house was on fire. I have said those words before, and a lot of people has explained why that is a bad idea. A great number of politicians have told me that panic never leads to anything good. And I agree. To panic unless you have to is a terrible idea. But when your house is on fire and you want to keep your house from burning to the ground, then that does require some level of panic. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, and the extinction rate is up to 10,000 times faster than what is considered normal, with up to 200 species becoming extinct every single day. Erosion of fertile topsoil, deforestation of our great forests, toxic air pollution, loss of insects and wildlife, the acidification of our oceans. These are all disastrous trends being accelerated by a way of life that we, here in our financially fortunate part of the world, see as our right to simply carry on. Our house is falling apart, and our leaders need to start acting accordingly, because at the moment they are not. If our house was falling apart, our leaders wouldn't go on like you do today. You would change almost every part of your behavior, as you do in an emergency. If our house was falling apart, you wouldn't hold 3 emergency Brexit summits and no emergency summit regarding the breakdown of the climate and environmental. The EU elections are coming up soon, and many of us who will be affected the most by this crisis, people like me, are not allowed to vote. Nor are we in a position to shape the decisions of business, politics, engineering, media, education or science. Because the time it takes for us to educate ourselves to do that simply does no longer exist. And that is why millions of children are taking it to the streets, school striking for the climate to create attention for the climate crisis. You need to listen to us, we who cannot vote. You need to vote for us, for your children and grandchildren. What we are doing now can soon no longer be undone. In this election, you vote for the future living conditions for humankind. And though the politics needed do not exist today, some alternatives are certainly less worse than others. And I have read that some parties do not even want me standing here today because they so desperately do not want to talk about climate breakdown. To do your best is no longer good enough. We must all do the seemingly possible. And it's okay if you refuse to listen to me. I am, after all, just a 16-year-old schoolgirl from Sweden. But you cannot ignore the scientists or the science or the millions of school striking children who are school striking for the right to a future. I beg you, please do not fail on this.
Izrabljati otroke na takem nivoju in za take stvari ni dopustno. Nocoj nas tale Zoom posluša skupaj nekaj čez 70 in upam, da je za Slovenijo ta metuljev efekt dovolj močen, da se bo razširil po vsej Sloveniji in tudi izven Slovenije in na to dalje. Kakšna velika laž. Žal jo mora širiti otrok našim politikom, ki to morajo preprosto verjeti, zato ker dobijo plačano, da izvajajo nad nami genocid, brez vprašanja, slepo vero, v katero moramo verjeti. Zdaj pa poglejte rezultat nocojšnjega večera. Tukaj bo kongresnik zaslišal Greto in jo vprašal, kaj je osnova vsega tega, čemur smo nocoj priče. Prosim, pozorno prisluhnite.
Ms. Thunberg, thank you for your involvement here today. I commend you for your willingness to testify and get involved with public policy. In the past, when you're talking about climate change, you have said, quote, "I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day." Is there what particular study or scientific report did you read that made you come to this conclusion?
Thank you for your question. First of all, let me just clear that those are metaphors. In speeches, you often use metaphors. Of course, I don't mean literally that I want people to panic. So there was no scientific study that made me come to that conclusion. There was no scientific study that made me come to that conclusion. There was no scientific study that made me come to that conclusion.
Greta Thunberg, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. You told people to vote for Joe Biden last year in a tweet, something you don't normally do, you said, get involved in party politics, but you made an exception. In your view, how has Joe Biden done on climate issues in his first 50 days in office? What grade would you give him?
Well, you shouldn't take that from me. I'm just a teenager, so I don't have the mandate to sort of give grades like that. My opinions on this doesn't matter. You should rather look at the science and whether his policies are in line with the Paris Agreement and to stay below 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius. And then you can clearly see that, no, it's not nearly enough in line with the science. See that, no, it's not nearly enough in line with the science. And that's not me saying, that's just black and white, looking at the facts.
Yeah. What would you like to see him do to fight climate change that he isn't doing, that he said he won't do? Because his administration is saying we've set up a climate office, we've set up a climate czar, we've re-signed Paris, we're conserving more land, we're undoing a lot of what Donald Trump did. What would you like to see him do that he's not doing?
I mean, I understand that it's difficult, and to be honest, I would not want to be in a politician's position right now. I can't imagine how hard it must be. But I mean, I would just like him to basically just treat the climate crisis like a crisis. They have said themselves that this is an existential threat, and they better treat it accordingly, which they are not. I mean, they are just treating the climate crisis like as it was a political topic. Among other topics, and treat it as a crisis. That's the number one step we need to do, and to spread awareness.
Is there a specific policy goal? If he rang you up and said, Greta, what should I do? What I can wave a presidential magic wand executive order. What should I do that I'm not? What would you say to him?
Well, nothing, because that's not democratic. An elected leader cannot do anything without support from voters, and I would not want anyone to do anything that would not have the support, because that would be undemocratic, and democracy is the most precious thing that we have, and we must not risk that. So what we need now is to raise awareness and to create public opinion, to treat the crisis like a crisis, because if people are not aware of the crisis that we face, of course they won't put pressure on the elected leaders. So I would just tell him to tell the situation as it is. Because, I mean, yes, you could say, I meet with a lot of world leaders, and they say, I can't do anything because I don't have the support from voters. Well, how can you expect support and pressure from voters if you are not treating the crisis like a crisis? Since the climate crisis doesn't exist, how can we expect people to want climate action?
That's a fair point.
No, jaz tudi mislim, da je to fair point, da ni klimatske krize, tako kot trdijo znanstveniki. Greta že ve, zakaj je to povedala, in vodilni tudi vedo, zakaj so morali 4 nove igralce izbrati, da so naredili ta film in zakaj ga tako močno plasirajo. Tako da jaz bi nocoj s tem delom zaključil. Povedal bi samo še to, da podnebnih izrednih razmer ni, hiša ne gori, nič bed. Spremembe so pomlad, poletje, jesen, zima, vse je normalno, vse lepo. Ustvarjajo nam umetno to vreme, umetno ustvarjajo potrese, poplave in tako naprej, zmrzali in kaj bi rekel, a ne, in potem to posnamejo lokalno, delijo pa globalno in ustvarjajo paniko. Tisti, ki jim to odgovarja, naredijo problem, dajajo rešitev. Ljudje ne pustimo se zabavati več, konc. Jaz mislim, da je tako prav, da enkrat naredimo tej zadevi konec in zapomnite si, njihovo novo geslo je zdaj: deluj lokalno, razmišljaj globalno. Kdorkoli od politikov, županov, zdaj, ko bodo lokalne volitve, se bo s tem hvalil, veste, da je v agendi. Odpikajte ga kot nulo, nima kaj početi na vodilnem mestu. S tem bi se zdaj poslovil in bi rekel tako: papežu, lepo ga pozdravljam, hvala Bogu, da sem pred 33 leti zapustil to gnezdo. Navidezna papeška ravnodušnost je najhujša bolezen. Laudato Si je ena velika laž, je ena velika prevara za človeštvo, kajti narava je prelepa in ne rabi nobenega Laudato Si, zato da bi mi živeli življenje z naravo, z Bogom, z dušo in drug z drugim pošteno življenje.